The Holy Trinity is a core belief among key sectors of the Christian faith. The idea of a higher power is comprised of three distinct but equal figures: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. While this concept is true for believers of the more traditional faith, a more universal concept that I believe we can all relate to is dualism, a philosophical and theological concept that describes the reality as consisting of two opposing principles, while existing as a fundamental idea in the universe. To put it simply, the image of good versus evil, light and dark, yin and yang. And much like with the Holy Trinity, there is the unholy Trinity, led by Satan himself. In the book of Revelation, Satan was cast down to earth and planned to take over all of its inhabitants with the aid of two accomplices, summoning the first beast that rose from the sea and the second beast that rose from the earth, together forming the Satanic Trinity. While Satan and the first beast are often seen to have more symbolic prominence, it is the second beast, known as the false prophet, that plays a vital if not more important role than the first beast, which is our main focus for today's video. What does this character represent? And how does the infamous number 666 fit into all of this? Join me on my creative process as we take an in-depth look at the false prophet, exploring its symbolic meaning and connection to the many devastating events that take place in the biblical apocalypse of Revelation. Hello friend, it's Jackie here. I'm back with another sculpture in my Biblical Creatures series. A while ago, I made a poll about 4 potential characters I'm most inspired to create next from Revelation. As you can see, the winning choice was the 4 Horsemen, with Mother Harlot being a close second. So naturally, I went with the one that was the least popular in the poll, but with good reasons. 1. I had already developed an idea for this character when I was finishing up my lab video. Second, it is the most time-friendly project compared to all my other choices. I cannot stress enough how massive and time-consuming these other projects are going to be, so we will get there when we get there. Anyway, after making my armature, I can now go to clay and start building out the general form. Then, I will gradually work my way to sculpting out all my lovely details, incorporating a lot of different textures this time around. As a quick recap, the story of Revelation is told through the perspective of a man named John, and the visions he sees about how the world will end, written in a complex allegorical nature. Now, to understand this false prophet character, we must first look at the text where he is mentioned in Revelation 13, verses 11 to 18. It says, "Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. It was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also, it causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So let's break this down from the beginning. Satan has summoned another beast that rose from the earth. The symbolic representation between the beast from the sea and the beast from the earth are both corrupt evil powers, but are distinct in their role, such as them being representations of the unholy union of church and state, or one representing a corrupt government or state and the other a false religion or belief. It then appeared with 2 horns like a lamb, but spoke like a dragon. The symbolic meaning of horns is multifaceted. often representing power, authority, and kingship. Whether it represents good or evil depends on the context of its use. It appears like a lamb, meaning that this prophet appeared kind and gentle, like a holy figure, but spoke with a fiery passion, often captivating, though his words are filled with deceit and heresy. These key verses provide the main foundation for my take on the false prophet. I had the crazy idea of making an evil parody version of my lamb character. I took inspiration from villain characters that are often the doppelganger or evil versions of heroes, in terms of the conceptual design. Since I did a half lamb and half lion hybrid for Jesus, my false prophet will be half goat and half wolf. While not inherently evil, goats are often stereotyped as such in the Bible, much like the parable of the sheep and the goats from Matthew 25, verses 3 to 46. While the wolf metaphor ties very nicely with a reference from Matthew 7, verse 15, talking about many other false prophets who walk among us. They will appear to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. Continuing on from Revelation 13, verse 12, it tells how the false prophet has all the power from the first beast, but only in his presence. With that power and control, he will make the people of the land worship the first beast, making the people reject their faith and believe in and idolize a corrupt power. Verse 13 describes how the false prophet can also perform great signs and wonders, making fire rain down from the heavens. This is a possible reference to an earlier chapter in Revelation about a couple of prophetic figures known as the two witnesses. Basically, they were granted divine power to deliver God's judgment during the Great Tribulation, performing with great ability to turn water into blood, controlling the sky and weather at will, manifesting fire, and releasing horrible plagues onto the earth. Some biblical experts would believe these two figures to be Elijah and Moses, but that's just a theory. This brings us back to the false prophet, who is a great liar and deceiver. He creates these illusions of miraculous wonders to convince people that he has divine power, similar to the two witnesses. Moving on to verse 14 to 15, describes how people must show their loyalty to the first beast by creating an image of him. The false prophet shall give this image life, and people must worship and bear the mark of the beast or be slain. This part is basically alluding to the sinful act of idolatry. Finally, in the last verse of 16 to 18, it talks about how the people of earth must bear the mark of the beast, either on the right hand or forehead. Many allude to the infamous number 666. This is a code for the name of this great evil figure, which represents the first beast, that is, the Antichrist. I must reiterate again how the book of Revelation is symbolic and allegorical in its writing. So when it talks about things such as a dragon and the beast from the sea, many agree that the dragon represents Satan, while the first beast from the sea is often interpreted as the Antichrist, even though it's not clearly stated or mentioned in the text. Which brings me to my point about the number 666. Many have studied and tried to decipher this number, and it's commonly thought to represent the Roman Emperor Nero, known for his ruthless, diabolical acts and cruelty towards Christians. If you look at the oldest record of the Greek manuscript, along with a coded system called Gematria, which was used back then, it shows us that the letters of his name spell out the number 666. Even in an older account, where the number is thought to be 616, it still would spell out Nero, but spelled differently. As for the meaning of the mark of the beast, we can look to the Greek language again, since the Greek word for mark is charagma, which means a stamp, an imprinted mark, or a carved image. You can see the connections in this with metal coins and currency, since they bear the image of rulers. Just like the text in verse 17 about not being able to buy or trade without bearing the mark of the beast. Another way the text could be interpreted is that bearing the mark of the beast is a form of baptism, similar to how some Christian denominations viewed baptism as a mandatory ritual to show obedience to God and gain salvation. Now to finish up the face, adding some pre-sculpted fangs and a serpentine-like tongue to give it a more sinister and diabolical appearance. and a goatee for an added fun little detail. After all, you can't spell goatee without goat. Can't forget about the wolf tail now, can we? The last and final piece to create the false prophet. Moving on to something different and completely new to me. I discovered these wonderful plastic beads that can be heated up and used to sculpt things with. Its malleable qualities make it perfect to work with silicone molds, or in my case, freehanding some flames that I want to incorporate into a decorative motif. This is my way of showing the false prophet's ability to perform signs of wonders and make fire rain from the sky. Working with this stuff was quite interesting. First and foremost, definitely wear gloves. I found heating this stuff up with a heat gun to be the best method. Since you roughly have less than 30 seconds to work with this when it's soft and malleable after heating. The nice part is that you can always reheat it as many times as you want. Here's my finished assortment of little flames. Adding an eye hook screw, which will come in handy later. Finishing it with UV resin. Going back to using Cosclay to make my second character to go with my false prophet. This is a reference to a verse in Revelation 16, verse 13 to 14, which says, "And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty." This passage is describing Satan and the 2 beasts speaking words of blasphemy, inciting violence on the earth. People who become under the influence of his words are a symbolic way of describing demonic possession. In my opinion, this is the mirror opposite of Jesus' power, which is speaking the word of God. This symbolism was described in an earlier chapter of Revelation, where a 2-edged sword came out of Jesus' mouth. Since Satan speaks words of evil, being a bad influence and deterring man from Christ, which makes more sense with the unclean spirits described to look like frogs. This is a reference to one of the 10 plagues in Moses' story. It is a plague that spreads and infects the land, or corrupting man and his faith in this case. With that concept in mind, I'm sculpting out a frog, but will add a wicked twist to its design. Using more of my plastic beads, I want to add movement and create an ethereal and whimsical spirit effect to my frog. If you have been following along on my other art projects, you know I have a very hard time keeping things simple. For the paint job, I will start with a black primer. Then get it really dirty looking with green and brown washes. And a touch of red to make the eyes stand out. Another fun detail I want to emphasize more was the wolf in sheep's clothing metaphor. I had a hard time finding the right kind of fur for this part, until I came across this furry pillowcase that had the right color, length, and texture I was going for. I'm making a simple cape that will be draped over my sculpture. Just going to eyeball the size needed, since I'm too lazy to make a pattern. I, being a former tailor, would hate to leave this unfinished edge exposed. So I'll finish this up with some hand sewing by doing a very tiny rolled hem and tacking it down with a simple cross stitch. I'm going back to my landmass. I want to finish the top using some of the leftover fur I had. Jumping back to the idea of making a mobile motif, I'm creating this using various gold charms, chains, and wire. This gold hoop will work nicely. I was inspired by those vintage novelty mobiles often depicting the solar system. Instead of planets, mines will have the orbs of flames hanging from the ends of these chains. This will be supported by a decorative arm, using an industrial metal rod and more wire. Then finishing it with gold. For a subtle but important detail, I'm using this bracelet charm to create a coin pendant to represent the mark of the beast. I covered the engraving it had with some green stuff and will hand draw the symbol over it. I didn't want to go with the obvious 666 using our modern English numbers. Instead, going with the ancient Greek symbol, since it's more accurate to the historical context of the Book of Revelation. Now to make a custom base for my false prophet. Being a land beast, I'm creating an earth terrain. This pink foam will work nicely to recreate tiny rocks and dirt. I shaved down my layers to make little boulders to add perspective and balance to the overall composition. Once adhered to my base, with all of my leftover shavings, I will lather it up with some Mod Podge. Then apply it to my base. Once it fully dries, I can now paint. I used a gray primer since that's all I had, but soon covered everything with a dark brown, since a warm color base would be a nice contrast to my cool neutral tones I plan on doing for my false prophet. Dry brushing multiple layers of color with various browns, off-whites, yellows, and red tones. At last, with all my tiny little details out of the way, I can now begin the final painting process. Let's sum up what we have learned about the false prophet and some of my final thoughts. Described as the second beast that came out of the earth, he appeared to be a gentle, peaceful figure, often thought to be a religious leader. He spoke with great authority, having mass influence over the inhabitants of the land, alluding to him being Jewish or having connections to Israel. Having immense power granted from the first beast, he can perform great signs and miracles that seem divine and holy. While many other false prophets exist, none compares to the power and appeal of the false prophet from Satan's Trinity. One keynote I would point out is this. When studying or trying to understand Revelation, or the Bible in general, I try to understand it from the historical context of the author and its relevance during the time period that it is referring to, since many modern takes are often very misguided. I consider those more biased opinions of conspiracy theory enthusiasts. Then again, I'm more of an art and history enthusiast than a religious one. For example, what happens in Revelation 13 verses 11 to 14 is very similar and has parallels to the history of Israel under Antiochus Epiphanes with the Antichrist and the false prophet. The false prophet is like Jason, who replaced his brother and became the new high priest after Antiochus replaced the faithful high priest Onias. But we don't need to get into that right now. Anyway, that pretty much sums up the false prophet of Revelation. It's nice dipping back into my now new ongoing series of characters from Revelation. I was quite surprised by the comments on my lamp video. I asked what biblical creature people would like to see next. I never expected Leviathan to be such a popular request. Definitely a must for me to explore in a future video and sculpture. Which, now that I think about it, one can make the argument that Leviathan and Behemoth are the true beasts of the sea and land in biblical lore. But much like the Antichrist and false prophet, much of their depictions and meaning are limited and shrouded in mystery. The true difference here is that Leviathan and Behemoth are generally neutral, neither good nor evil for the most part, existing in the natural order of chaos, while the Antichrist and false prophet are clearly stated to be evil and serve as Satan's most trusted co-conspirators. I'm just about done with the painting at this point, which means we can see how it all comes together in the final look. Hope you enjoyed my take on the false prophet from Revelation. This turned out to be much more elaborate than I ever thought it would be. By the way, I'll let you in on a little secret. This art piece is not 100% complete. It's missing one little detail referencing one of the verses about the false prophet. This was intentional since I haven't thought of how this figure will look just yet. Let me know down in the comments if you know what it is, or what your guesses are to what I'm referring to. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Remember to stay creative, and I will see you in the next one.
you.